Welcome to Guided by Third Wheel, the podcast. My name is Amber Ireland, and I'm here with my co-host, Jill Bucaro. Let's get started.
Welcome back, everybody, to Guided by Third Wheel. Amber and I thought today we would do, I wouldn't call it a follow-up, maybe more like a check-in, about our goals for the year. Mm-hmm. So a couple episodes ago, right before 2024 started, we talked about goal setting in general, right? And like some tips and tricks for goal setting, some things that we were doing to help kind of bolster our goals, set ourselves up for success. We talked about our 60 Strong group. And now we are like comfortably into 2024. Mm-hmm. Amber and I both are doing the 60 Strong Challenge, so we had some habits that we are implementing on a daily basis, as well as just some more personal long-term goals that each of us have, like for ourselves, for our third wheel business, for work, for all sorts of things. I do think there is an art to goal setting for sure. Like, yes. I think you have to be so thoughtful about how you do it. We talked about like determining your why, but I think like the real art or the work comes into like maintaining those goals, like keeping those habits, staying consistent, pivoting when you need to pivot, keeping your eye on the prize and moving towards those goals. And I think that's where we see both ourselves and then like people, that we know and within our networks, that's where it begins to fall apart, that consistency piece. So we wanted to talk a little bit about just that like discipline, like what keeps us from accomplishing what we want, right? When we've engaged in some good goal setting and we feel like we have a good idea of what we need to change to, make ourselves happier, to make our lives more full. Why, even if we feel like we know what we want to do, are we still falling short? Are we still not getting it? Mm-hmm. So that's what we're going to try to talk about today.
Yeah.
So any thoughts on any of that, Amber? Where do you think we should start?
Kind of what we talked about before that we started the podcast is just this idea around discipline and how sometimes when you say the word discipline, when you're like, I am disciplined and I will do what I need to do, there's a connotation there that you are going to like push through in a very sadistic way with yourself, right?
It's like it's going to be ugly and awful, but I'm going to do it. Yes.
Yeah. And I don't think that discipline always has to be that way. And I think we need to get out of the thought that when we create habits or we decide that there are certain habits that we want to take on in order to meet our goals, that the discipline around those habits really is about caring for yourself, right? Because that discipline is I'm going to do this habit because I know that this habit brings me closer to the goal that I want. Right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And using that why to be your discipline, to stick with the habit so that you can meet the goal. And I see a lot of times things falling apart for people when they can't trace back why they're doing something to a greater good for themselves.
Yes. I agree with that entirely. And it's one of my other like Jillisms that I always say is like, nobody gives a fuck about you but you.
Right.
At the end of the day, like truly, nobody gives a fuck about you but you. And if you don't give a fuck about you, then that means nobody does.
Right.
I mean, and I think we forget that sometimes. Like, I feel like even when I first started as a social worker in the field and I was doing case management and clinical work and therapy and stuff with clients, I could get so caught up in like just the shit that they had been through, right? Like their trauma. And like we all know that we live in like a cruel and unfair world, right? And some of us are given disadvantage that we didn't deserve or that we didn't do anything, to get. But at the end of the day, there is this piece of personal accountability.
Right.
We have to be the ones, like we have to be the heroes of our own story.
Right.
Nobody else is going to do that for us. And I think I did my clients and even some of the people that worked for me a disservice because I was always trying to like, I was giving way too many fucks about them than I was, instead of empowering them to give a fuck about themselves.
Yes.
To say, like, nobody can fix this but you, right? Mm-hmm. This is a you problem, and you have to care about yourself enough to do it. And I think that was a hard thing for me to learn, like, for myself. And then also, I think that realization has, like, vastly changed the way that I engage with people at my job, too.
Yeah. And I think, when we say that, I know that there are people that swing to an extreme, right? Where they're like, well, if nobody cares about me except for me, then I don't need to engage with other people. Then that means I can do this all myself. This means I can pull myself up by my bootstraps,
Sure.
Which is not what we're saying at all. Because here's the thing. If I choose to engage with someone else because they provide a service or they provide a support to me or they provide some type of compassion to me that helps me meet my goals, I'm making that choice to engage. I'm making that choice to fully lean in to this additional support to move me forward on my goals. And just remembering that, yes, we are going to need other people in our lives to move forward. It's just, I can't determine, I can be grateful for someone being there in my life and helping me along my path and walking with me. But if I give all of my success to that one person or those few people and say, like, I would be nothing if they weren't here.
Right.
That's where you just kind of give away all of your own power and you stop knowing that you are the one that gave a fuck enough to move forward and do what you need to do.
Absolutely. And I think there's something like, you don't want to give your power away. And I think we need to be thoughtful about our energy as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I care a lot about my community. I care a lot about my friends and my family. And I would spend a lot of time focused on that,
right.
on my work, and then be like, well, why am I not getting the things that I want, right? Why are things not going the way that I want them to for me personally? And it's like, well, Jill, look where your energy is directed, right? It's where is all of your focus? Where is all of your energy? And then when I started to, take some of that energy, because I think that's a balance too, right? Put some of that energy towards myself, while keeping some of that energy, towards the people I love, the work that I love, the things that I do. And then I started to really be able to think about, like, and we've talked about this before, like, let me give myself a little bit of my A game too.
Right.
That focus is going to lead to some of that personal responsibility, like taking responsibility for the things that I want.
Yeah. And I mean, this has taken an energetic turn, I think, but I think it's a great thing to remember that when you pour into yourself, and you shine a little brighter and people can see you as someone who is kind of like, quote unquote, made it, right? Is doing better. It has overcome obstacles that they've witnessed in your life. And now they see that you have, moved past those. You become a guiding light for other people just by virtue of doing your own work and meeting your own goals. You don't have to you don't have to go out and be somebody's savior. You don't have to go out and direct traffic for everyone else's life. Just by living your own life and shining a little bit brighter so that people can see it, that inspires other people to do that. Inspires people to come to you and say, like, hey, how did you do that? And then it becomes very easy because it's like, I can tell you how I got to where I got, and if that helps you, that's cool. I love reminding people of that because I think a lot of times we're like, I haven't gone to the right school, or I don't have the right education, or I don't have the right whatever to help people, right? Your life helps people. If you live your life well, if you pour into yourself, if you set your goals and create your habits and live in your authentic power, that helps other people.
Yes.
And that doesn't take anything other than you giving a fuck about yourself,
right,
and pouring in.
Woo! That's so true. I love when you said that part about like traffic directing other people's lives, right? Because I was like a phenomenal traffic director of other people's lives. I'm like, gather round, everyone, and I will tell you what to do. But to your point, I think I'm a way more effective and transformational leader, both like formally and informally, since I have spent more time worrying about myself, right? Thinking about myself, improving myself, being authentic in the things that I feel like I do well and the things that I'm struggling with and the things that I've overcome. I think that is so much more effective than some of that other stuff. Yeah, so that's like, to me, like that's a huge piece of the why, right? Like what like a space and like a groove to aspire to, right? To kind of have that nice balance of like, I am engaged with the people and the communities that I care about, but I am spending enough time pouring into myself.
Right.
So what do we say, though, to people who are like, yes, I want to be there, but here are my goals for me personally, right?
Right.
I want a job where I make more money. I want to find a romantic partnership.
Right.
I want to lose weight. I want to just be healthier overall. I want to be better with money.
Right.
How do we help people, or what would your advice to people be? They've set these goals and it's, we're 4, 5, 6 weeks into the year and it's all fallen apart.
Yeah. Well, I would say if you've set these goals and you've put habits into place, right? You've said, this is my goal and these are the things I'm going to start doing in order to step toward that goal. Because here's the deal. Goal setting is not just goal setting. I don't set a goal that I'm going to earn twice my income from last year to this year and then just sit there and hope that it happens by the end of the year.
Sure.
Like, I've got to go out and actually do things that are going to get me to that place, right? So I have to set habits in place to do that. And so when we get to a place where we're like, I've been doing these habits, or these habits they feel too hard, I don't feel motivated to do them, that's where we need to sit back and say, okay, first off, the goals that I said that I wanted, do I really want those things?
Ooh, do I want those
right.
things?
Or am I doing this for someone else or for something else? Or, do I want it? Right?
Yeah.
Because sometimes you're like, okay, I want to weigh this amount. Right? And so my habits are going to be that every day I'm going to work out. Every day I'm going to eat more vegetables. Every day I'm going to drink more water. Right? And, you get 10 days into that, and you don't want to go to the gym. And you're like, there's nothing in me that wants to do this.
Yeah.
Well, is that really what you wanted?
Is that number what you wanted?
Right.
Like that weight number.
Right. And at that point, it's time to really kind of sit down with yourself and reevaluate. Maybe it is what you wanted, and you just need to have that pep talk with yourself and say, like, this is my why, and I will get up and do this, right? Even though I don't want to. Right now, like my headspace right now, I don't want to do this, but I know what my why is, and I know that in the long run, this is good for me. Or I sit down with myself and I'm like, working out every day is not worth it to be at that number, right? I don't want that. And then you kind of change things up and tweak them. And that's, something we talk about with self-care and any kind of plan that you put in place, is that you need to be willing to sit down and look at it again and say, like, is this really what I want when things start to get harder, things feel like they're not working like you had anticipated that they were? That's one big thing to do. Another thing that I like to have people do when they do goal setting is, whatever your goal is, and if you have 6 goals, you have 10 goals, you have 1,000 goals, it doesn't matter. I would say, if I had to, direct someone's life, I would say, why don't we choose like maybe 5, 6, 7 goals for a year, right? Like big goals for a year, because after that, they kind of get lost in the shuffle of the year. When you choose that goal, spend some time sitting and thinking about what it would be like to have that goal. What feelings come up for you? How do you feel when you have what it is that you want? And if you can sit in that feeling on a regular basis, then your why becomes a lot clearer. Because when you don't want to do it, you're like, but God, I just know what it would feel like if I had this. And so, it helps to balance that out, and it creates that motivation. I don't think people do that enough. Sit in what it would feel like to have exactly what you want in that goal.
I agree with that. And I think sitting in that, which is like just truly like taking time, and not just like, oh, let me sit in it one time for 2 minutes. Like, let me do that over and over again. I think that's going to help you develop your why. And it's also going to shed some light on maybe this isn't the right what. Right. Because if I'm like looking at myself, when I hit that weight number, right? Or when I'm making that much money, right? Or when I, let me envision myself in this relationship. If I'm kind of like, that's not doing it for me either. Then maybe you start to clue in, is this somebody else's goal for me, right? Is this society's expectation of me? Is this what I think I should want because I've already accomplished X, Y, and Z? I think that like visualizing, sitting in it, thinking about yourself in it, not only is it good energetically for getting you there, if that's what you want, it's really going to clue you in to, do I even want this?
Yeah. And for me, when I sit down into goals, I know that there are about 3 feelings that if I can reach that feeling sitting in what I want, I know that that is a goal that is aligned for me. And that is freedom, that is peace, and that is joy.
Nah.
And if I'm sitting in a feeling of being proud,
Yeah.
if I'm sitting in a feeling of almost like elated all the time,
Like you just got a little high, like you got
right,
hit.
then I know like maybe this isn't right.
Yeah.
Right? Because those are the things that I want to feel. And I think that is something too, as you create goals, as you become someone who is achieving what they want, right? You're able to have that discipline, to have the habits, or to move through the habits to get what you want in life. You start digging deeper into goals. The goal stops being the new car, the new house, the type of body. The goal starts being just those feelings. Like the goal starts being, I want to have a sense of good health instead of I want to weigh this amount, look this way, wear this size clothes, that type of things.
I want to be comfortable in my own body. I want to be comfortable in my own skin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you kind of release the attachment to what that looks like.
Yes.
You don't set the parameters around it, right? Because sometimes we know, like, we set up all the parameters and we're like, this is the only thing. This is the only thing that's going to make me happy.
This is it, yeah.
Right?
Yes.
And we've just boxed ourselves in to something that may not be the greatest happiness we could experience.
Yes. No, and I think that's why digging deeper is cool, because there is like an element of surrender to it as well. Like I know the things that I want, right? To feel comfortable in my own skin, to have financial freedom, right? To have authentic connection and have people in my life that love me and that I connect well with, right? But when you're able to really drill down to that feeling, I think it allows for some surrender to like the surprises and the cool stuff that the universe can bring. Because when you are so tied to a specific thing, right? Like I want a relationship with this person. I want to weigh this much. I want to do whatever. You probably are cutting yourself off or saying no to some of the opportunities for really cool things that are coming your way. Yeah, that's interesting. That's given me a lot to think about, right? Like when we take the people and the places and the numbers away from the goals, we're probably going to be more like how you talked about a couple podcasts ago, where our oars are up out of the water, right? And we're riding the current. We might be like making some moves on direction, but we're allowing what is coming to come and to experience it.
And I think that's the difference between the goal and the habit, right? The goal should be, like, you should be able to sit in the goal and know what that goal feels like. The habits are more of those, like, I'm going to drink 64 ounces of water a day.
Sure.
Right? Because we do have to, like, create some level of discipline around our lives in order to move forward with our goals. If you think about it, you don't see very many people who are really excelling in life that don't have like daily practices, that don't have things that they do on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, because they've learned how to cultivate that. They know, if I do this every day, my body feels good. If I do this every single day, my mental health is better.
Yes.
Those are all like the very basic building blocks of making sure that you are ready to receive what is coming to you. Because when you have deficits in those areas, then that's what you have to focus on.
Right.
In order to stay alive. Like, that's what you got to focus on.
Yes. No, that's so true. And I think that's one thing too, when we talk about like habit setting, is like for me, like when I did my 60 strong goals, like one of my big goals for the year that does seem kind of like nebulous and more like, a feeling, is like I want to be less stressed, right? And I want to be more physically healthy. Okay, like I'm pretty okay with where my weight is. Like, if I lost 5 or 10 pounds, would I be sad? No, right? But like overall, like I'm cool with how my body looks. But I know that like what I put into it isn't always very healthy. I know that I don't always feel very good. And I think when I thought about like my habits, like so many of them fed into that one goal. And I think I see that with some sometimes with people too is that they have too many goals almost.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't want to be like, you have too many goals, you're dreaming too big, but I think sometimes we're spreading ourselves too thin, right? So it's like, I have this one goal of like being healthy and less stressed, right? And almost all of my habits that I did for 60 Strong feed into that one goal.
Right.
There's a water goal. There's like a sugar reduction goal, right? There's a goal about like thinking about my first meal of the day breakfast and making it actually be like healthy and nutritious, right? Getting up early allows me to like make that healthy breakfast, to have more time to center myself and engage in those daily practices. And I think that sometimes we have to think about that too, right? Like usually a goal is not going to be achieved with just one habit, right? We're not going to get to our ideal health just by reducing calories or just by working out every day. Like there's so many more components to it. And I think when you talk about, like you said, like those feelings or those kind of big, broader goals, that's when you don't need that many, right? You don't need that many, so.
Right. And you start to dial down into what really is going to make a change for you.
Right.
We keep coming back to weight loss, but it's something that a lot of people, weight loss, health, building strength, those types of things. A lot of people have goals around that. When we look at that, we get a lot of information from around us, right? The doctors say you have to do this, and society says do this, and there's this weird fad diet, and your best friend does this, your mom says to do it this way. So we start putting habits into place that serve those masters. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like we're like, okay, well, this is the way that it should go. Instead of like really getting down to why is it that why am I not okay with the weight that I am right now? And for everyone, that is going to be different. And when you can dig down to what that is and you can address that, all of those other pieces become very easy to do because you know your why.
And I think you can apply that to anything. Like, I think you can, I think another thing that I hear people being like, is, like, I really want to meet somebody, right? I want to find somebody. Like,
yes.
I haven't found a relationship that's been long-term and fulfilling. I've had a divorce, right? And I'm looking for something better. And I think, there's all of those other masters, right? Like, this is what society tells you need, right? This is the kind of guy your best friend thinks you need, right? This is the kind of guy that your mom or your kids would like, and I think, but to your point, like, until you drill down, what is it that I'm looking for? What feels like it's missing in terms of connection in my life, and until you figure that out, you're going to be on like stupid dating apps or speed dating or spending time with people you don't even like, right? Or like hitting bars that you never even wanted to go to because you're just taking in all of this direction and just like engaging in all of these habits and behaviors without thinking about the why.
And you're changing who you are in order to have what you want. And that's another piece that, I hear that a lot with people who are struggling with finding those long-term relationships. And oftentimes what I find is these are folks who like know who they are, or they are on the journey to know who they are. And they are, very rapidly up-leveling into their authenticity. And so my advice there is, you stay true to who you are, right? If you meet people, great. If they can't let you be authentic and they don't have like their own life too, to where you can come together and have, I hate that society tells us like you got to find somebody to complete you.
Ew, I hate that also.
We're going to put these two people together and they become one. And it's like, no, these two people are still two people. And
two complete people.
Right. And how great is it to be in relationship with another whole, complete person?
Right.
I don't want to be half of you.
I want to be a whole of me, yes.
Right. I don't want to have to attend to you. Now, does that mean that we don't ever take care of people? No. Yes, of course, if you're sick, if you're whatever, but I don't want to be your mom every day. I don't want to have to help you make daily decisions because you have some kind of deficit there and you were looking for somebody to fill your, this void for you. And here I am. Like, no, I'm not available for that.
Well, and I think it goes back to what we were saying at the beginning of this podcast is like, you need to give a fuck about you and your person needs to give a fuck about themselves, right? And we all need to do that, and we need to be available for connection and assistance and love and empathy and cooperation and all of those cool verbs, right? But at the end of the day,
Right.
Yeah, you want somebody who is also authentically them and focused on them. As well. But I think too that's not what society tells us,
No.
right? And so that is why that drilling down is so important to think about, what do I really want? Not what does the world tell me I'm lacking? What do I really want?
Right. Yep. And I think sitting in that feeling of like, what is the ideal partner for me? What would that look like? And just kind of like sitting and almost daydreaming about that. Like, what would that look like? And then after you daydream about it, maybe write some things down and then really think about that. Am I looking for somebody to do something for me that I'm not doing for myself?
Ooh, shit.
Or am I looking for a partner to do things with me? Right? And everything that you put on that list that you're not doing for yourself, those are the things you need to start working on.
And I think that's not just for partners. That's for like, what am I looking for this number on the scale to fill inside of me? What am I looking for this job to give me? Right? I think shoot, Amber, that's some revolutionary shit right there. Like, what is it that I think this will give me that I'm not giving myself when I am perfectly capable of giving it to myself?
Right.
Damn.
And is it always more fun when you have like external validation or something external to walk along with you to give you, what it is that you like? Yes. And we can look for that. But that can't be that. If that thing goes away, then now there's a hole.
Yes. It can be like what you like, but it can't be like what you need.
Yes.
You have to be able to meet your own needs. You have to be able to do that. And no, because what's going to be terrible, and what at least I know to be true from life, is like the things that I wouldn't give myself, right? Even when I thought I found the perfect relationship, even when I lost 35 pounds, right? And was skinny, even when I got my quote unquote dream job, those pieces of me were still empty.
Yeah.
They were still empty. And I think that is like the hardest thing of it all. Yeah. I mean, I had a point in my life a couple years ago where I truly, in theory, had everything I said I wanted. And I'm like, why do I still feel empty inside? And that was one of the deepest, darkest depressions of my entire life. And, and thankfully that was kind of like my little rock bottom, right? To really be like, okay, Jill, like, what you're doing isn't manageable, right? You're not meeting your needs. And what are you going to do to start doing that, right? And thankfully, I was able to ricochet off that rock bottom and scoot on up. But I think you have to think about that, right? Is it the number on the scale, or is it something you're not giving yourself? Is it the boyfriend, or is it something you're not giving yourself, or you don't believe about yourself?
And something else to think about when we think about what we are giving to ourselves and what we are expecting other people to give to us to fill us up, is that what ends up happening is if I have a hole that I'm trying to get someone else to fill for me, I'm trying to get a job, I'm trying to get, a partner or whatever to fill for me, I will start changing how I behave in order to keep that thing.
Yes.
If I feel like there is a threat that they're going to be gone. And this is very different than just having companionship with somebody and being like, I don't want you to go away because I'm going to miss you. This is like that dire need that, like, if you leave, if this ends, I am going to have nothing.
Yes. Because I am relying on you to prop me all the way up. I am relying, I've been in places where I'm relying on this job to prop me all the way up. I've been relying on this identity, this part of me, to prop me all the way up. And certainly I've done it with people too, in relationships for sure. Yeah. And I think, to circle back to some of that discipline and staying consistent towards our goals or the things that we want, I mean, there has to be that honesty with yourself, being in tune with yourself, and doing it for like a true and genuine love. Like, Jill, you deserve these things, right? Like, Jill, you deserve to feel comfortable in the skin that you're in, right? You deserve to have a job that fills you up and doesn't like stress you out to the point that you're like a glassy-eyed, walking zombie nightmare, right? You deserve to have people in your life that care about you and see you for who you are. And until you believe that, And I think, and also I think, and in believing that, it helps with the motivation. It helps with the discipline because you're worth it. I think there were many times in my life that I had goals, but I couldn't stay consistent or motivated in reaching them because I don't know that I thought like I was worth the energy and the effort. You know? And that's a hard thing to overcome, but people do it, you know, you can. So, but I think it's deeper than that.
That was a lot of things.
We went deeper than I thought. I thought maybe we were going to do some like tips and tricks to stay consistent.
To stay consistent on your habits. No,
I'm like, here's a great app to download on your phone.
Nope, it doesn't work that way, unfortunately.
It doesn't.
But, you know, a lot of people do think it works that way. And a lot of people have been pulled into that mindset that if you check all of these boxes, everything will be fine. And it can work that way if you create your own boxes to check. You can't take the prescribed boxes to check.
Right. You have and I think, and definitely I think there are some like tips and tricks to helping you stay consistent for sure, because you know, I feel like I truly know a lot of these things that I've said. Like I know that I'm worth it. I have a better idea of my why. I have clearer understanding, certainly in certain areas of my life, of what I want, right? And I've drilled some of that down. But yeah, you're still going to need to use the tips and tricks, right? Whether it's like accountability partner. Like for me, I've always posted all my stuff on social, right? Because like, you know, I have a crippling, terrible fear of like, you know, what people think about me. So if I can stay consistent on social, I can do it that way, you know? And so I think there are definitely some tips and tricks, but the tips and tricks are never going to work in the long term. Until you've figured out, until you've done some of this internal work. And I also think, you know, disclaimer here that this isn't necessarily internal work you have to do yourself, right? There are books, there are workbooks, there are therapists out here in this world, right? That you can utilize. And I understand that some of those things, you know, cost money and require privilege, right? So let me own that as well. But I also think it's not like, well, you got to go figure out your why. Yeah. Goodbye, off you go, you know, go sit in the wilderness by yourself and do that. I mean, I do think that there are a lot of people on this journey whose wisdom we can tap into. Yeah.
Determining your why takes sometimes, you know, you can bounce that with other people, right? You can bounce that with a therapist. You can bounce that with a friend. You can bounce that with, you know, somebody that you trust. But also, just know that every time you bounce it externally, you're going to get an external response, right?
Yeah, sure.
And so making sure that you are also doing work with yourself and you're spending that time with yourself and pouring into yourself. And I hear more often than not from people like, I don't have time to sit by myself. I don't have time to even sit for 5 minutes and not be interrupted. That is a problem. That is a problem because that means that you are pouring into everyone else around you far more than you're pouring into yourself.
Right.
And
you need to set a boundary.
Right. You need to set a boundary, but also all of these people that you're pouring into, you probably love them. You probably want the best for them. You want to be able to lead them, whether it's your children, your partners, your friends, your family, people at work. You care about them, and that's why you're pouring into them. But just know, like we talked about at the very beginning of this podcast, until you are shining brighter and they can see your growth, all you're doing is being kind of the traffic director for them. Like the person who's like, if you do this, if you do that. And sometimes that wisdom is helpful to people, even when, I mean, I know that there's been times where I told somebody to do something that I hadn't done myself, you know, and it was helpful for them and they were able to take it and go. But I know that I'm a lot more effective when my light is shining brighter, when I've done the work and I can, you know, kind of stand in that.
Yes, I agree. When you actually practice what you preach, I think it's a lot more effective and it's a lot more authentic. And people can tell the difference for sure.
And you have to do less of that traffic directing.
Yes, and I just think, yeah, you have to do less of that traffic directing. And I think, I used to be one of those people where I'm like, I don't have a spare minute in the day. Like, nobody is busier than me, right? I am scheduled. I'll say I am scheduled from 7 a.m. until 10 p.m. today. And I thought I needed to be that scheduled to get everything done. And then I started like drawing boundaries, like where I was like, people are going to hate me. People are going to be like, Jill sucks at her job, right? Like, people are going to be like, she's such a bitch, all these things. And it's like, actually, none of that happened.
No.
And I have way more time to engage with myself, to allow myself to rest, to quiet my mind enough that I can actually have some of these thoughts, right? Because when you're running around in like panic busy mode all day, your brain doesn't even have the ability to go deep enough to have these thoughts and conversations with yourself. Like you literally can't, because you're running high on like adrenaline and cortisol and everything else. Like there is like, it is physiologically impossible for you to go deep like that unless you give yourself quiet, space to rest, downtime, things of that nature.
Yeah. It's funny because I had a conversation yesterday or the day before about bitchiness. And but as you said that, it kind of reminded me that when we are doing that, when we are living at that very like surface level, adrenaline level, and we are afraid that people are going to think we're bitchy, that we're not doing our job well, and all of these things, it is more likely that people are thinking that about you while you're doing that than it is when you take the time to really pour into yourself and they can see something more authentic. Because when I was having that conversation, I asked my partner, I said, do you think that people think that I'm bitchy? And he was like, well, I don't think you're bitchy. And I'm like, but do you think other people think it?
like, I don't care what you think.
Like, I know that you're not going to tell me that, but do you think other people think that? And he was like, well, I wouldn't think so. And I said, I don't feel like other people think that I'm bitchy. I said, but there was a time in my life where I know people thought I know that was a common term thrown around.
Oh, for sure. About me too. Yes.
But it was when I was grinding and directing.
Yes, I agree with that. I think that when you are grinding and directing and you're like, all these people need me, and they're like, we would prefer if you left us the fuck alone. I'm like,
need is a strong word.
I'm like, what would you guys do without me? They're like, be happier and less stressed. Okay, perfect. But I do think there's that. And I think people I know that I used to feel this way, that I used to look at other people that like took time for themselves and like set boundaries and like, said things to me like via email, like, oh, I don't work after 5 o'clock that day, right? Or like, oh, I'm preparing for vacation, so I'm not taking any meetings that week. And I think I would be resentful of those people.
Yes.
But I think that resentment lived in envy.
Yes.
Because I was jealous or envious rather of their ability to like set a boundary.
Yeah.
When I am like literally like white knuckling my entire fucking life, right? And I'm like, look at them thinking they don't have to take any meetings, the week before they go on vacation. And so I wonder if people look at you and resent you, but that's just a reflection of their own, of what they want. But I don't think anybody would say that you're bitchy. Hopefully people don't think, I don't know, people might still think I'm bitchy. I don't know. But sometimes I do operate in the adrenaline space.
Well, so. I will say this, okay? And, bitch is kind of a term that we can unpack all the way all around, right?
We do another podcast on the word bitch, yeah.
But I think that there's a difference between people knowing that you are going to be assertive, like you are going to show up and you're going to say the thing. So if they are hoping to go and meet with you and have some kind of fluff conversation about something that's important, well, that's not going to happen, right? Like, and also I think that that's good because people know that.
Well, that's
right?
They're walking being authentic.
Right. And they know that. And so, like, why would you show up and think that? Like, you know what's about to happen. You know that Jill's going to come in and she's going to tell the truth. And if you're trying to bullshit something, she's going to be like, yeah, and also that's not true.
And also, please stop bullshitting me. Yeah,
but I think but I do think, just in the time that I've known you, you do that in a more compassionate way. You do that in a way that is like, I'm being honest with you, and I'm not doing it to be mean. Like, I'm not trying to, like, have the meeting after the meeting where it's like, did you see how I, like, tore into that person? It's just, it's like, well, no, I didn't tear into them. I just had to tell them, like, that's not how
Right.
it is.
And I think as I've become more and more in tune with my why, like, why do I do the work that I do, right? Like what is truly the purpose of me working 1 million hours at the public defender's office? Like, what am I trying to accomplish? And I think I'm very vocal about my why. I think I'm aligned with my why. So to your point, when I have to have those hard conversations with people, or have those like call out or call in conversations with people, they all know it's tied to the why.
Right.
She's doing this because of X. Whereas I think before, 5 or 6 years ago, I was just stressed and crazy and just like rained terror down upon people, when they did not follow my traffic directions that I was prescribing to them. So I do think there's a difference there. And I always think, talking about that resentment piece, something I either read somewhere, or I heard somewhere, or heard in a podcast or something. Someone told me once, like, look at what really bothers you about other people.
Yes.
What really fucking irks you. And it's typically something you're envious of, or something you don't like about yourself.
Yes.
And so whenever I am getting resentful or triggered by somebody else or somebody else's behavior, that has always been a clue to me, in the last couple of years, to be like, whoa, what's coming up for you here, Jill?
Right.
Like, this person set a boundary with you. Are you letting your boundaries slip? Right. Or like somebody did something and you're feeling like this weird, like, gush of shame or weirdness, what is that? What's going on inside of you there? So I think we have to think about that too.
Yes, for sure. That's always a nice, and I say a nice slap in the face sometimes,
It is
but
a
like
slap
when
in the
you,
face.
when you come up against people who you're just like, gosh, like, it's just everything they do. It's like, ugh. And then you start to realize, like, oh, that's because what you do is what I'm afraid of doing. Right.
Yep.
Or I'm trying to, like, internally, I'm trying to, like, hold that back, and I haven't really put it to bed yet. Or what you're doing is what I wish I could do.
Yes.
And so it's irritating to me that you get to do it and I don't get to do
and
it.
I'm resentful. I'm mad.
Yeah.
that you
Instead
get to do
of, like, let me sit in this space of honoring that you have reached the place where you're able to do this, and you're able to, and maybe looking to you as to, like, how did you get to this place? Because I
Right.
would also like to be there.
Please tell me. Can we unpack this a little bit?
Yeah.
I think that's another thing to really think about. All right. I feel like we've been on a million tangents, but I loved them all.
We have.
Do we feel like we've said everything we need to say about staying consistent? We've talked about the why. We've talked about
discipline,
several habits, all for the same goal.
Right.
Accountability, calling in your people to support you.
Yes.
I feel like we've covered it.
I think we have too. The only last thing that I would like to say, and we touched on it a little bit, is remain flexible. Because sometimes we put, like I said, you create your box of happiness and don't realize that your real joy sits in a different box that you won't look in because you are sitting in your perceived box of happiness. So make sure that you remain flexible and not completely tied to specific outcomes, like a specific person, like, I need a car that is this color. I need, you know what I mean? Like,
because I need this job.
Because you'll miss things. Other things will come along, and instead of looking at that and being like, oh, that was everything I wanted and more, you're like, no, that car wasn't purple, certainly not mine.
Certainly not. Well,
right?
And I think I think there are people that are struggling to reach their goals or the things they want because they struggle with the motivation, discipline, and consistency.
Right.
And I do think there is another group of people, and I would probably put myself more in this group of people, that are like over disciplined to the point that it moves towards rigidity.
Yes.
And they are not, the universe is literally like dropping gifts on their fucking heads.
Right.
And they're like, whoa, that is not my gift. What is this weird thing falling out of the sky?
Yep.
Certainly not mine. Because to your point, like, I am hyper fixated on this person, this position, this number on the scale, this vacation coming up. Like, certainly this opportunity is not mine.
Right.
So I think, people should think about which bucket do they fall in, because like all things in life, right? The middle path, the happy middle is where you need to be. You need to be disciplined, but you need to be open to receive. Good stuff. All right, pull a card for us.
All right. Let's go tarot today if I can. Actually, no. Let's do this one. Let's do this one. It'll take a minute longer because it's kind of a more longer-winded deck. But it's called the Sacred Rebels Oracle. And we will link that in our social.
And I think we've pulled from this one before for the podcast.
Maybe.
This is one of your fave oracles,
Yes.
I feel like.
I
You love
like-
a Sacred Rebel.
I like these. I like an Alana Fairchild deck, just in general. So, all right, as if you haven't already noticed, I am congested today, but we are going to take a deep breath together and release. And set the intention that you have and will continue to receive exactly what you need from this episode and this card pull today. And there it is. And the card is follow your own rhythm. This card speaks a lot to not subscribing to everything that is around you and finding your own rhythm and finding your own dance that brings you joy and feels fluid to you. And so I think that this is beautiful as we're talking about habits and we're talking about goals. And we've talked about getting down to that real why. You need to follow your own rhythm. You need to make sure that what you are doing is for you and for your highest good.
Yes.
And when it's for your highest good, it will be for the highest good of everyone around you. Trusting that.
Sure. Yes.
But we don't do things because our mom said it was this way and we don't feel like that's true.
Our society told us this is what we need to be doing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Follow your own rhythm. I love it. All right, guys. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Guided by Third Wheel, the podcast. We would be honored if you would like, rate, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Until next time, be well.